social and market preparation as a result of automation. So this is my perspective on AI automation and the pending labor crisis. So let's start with who I am. My name is Makai Morin. I'm a researcher. I research trends. I'm a speaker for events like this. I present for boards and management teams and tech conferences regarding a variety of subjects. Today will be on automation. Kind of started my career initially as a digital artist. I received a little bit of minor celebrity for my digital works that are the highest resolution rendered and printed art in the world presently. As far as I know, I haven't heard otherwise. I'm a strategic advisor. I work closely with executives and new ventures on how to kind of position their B2B businesses and strategize growth. I'm an author. I write articles based on tech trends, analysis of markets and innovation. I do consulting for innovation, product innovation specifically. So I'll look at companies' product and service packages and kind of advise in which direction to go. So all these things together, I like to call myself a futurist. I know we hear that term kind of tossed around a lot. It's lost a lot of its value as of late, but in reality, that's what I am. I wear many hats, and these hats all fit under the umbrella of futurism, which is an important field right now for growth and development. So before we begin, I just want you to think of an industry or a profession, a job that you believe will be able to escape automation. Try to remember it, come back to it at the end of the presentation and kind of discuss it. So this presentation's intent, I intend on discussing trends, AI and automation, labor forecasts, and the need for policy. So let's start with trends. So what are trends and how do they help us forecast change? So a lot of people have a cursory knowledge of what trends are. We know that they're, something that happens over time and we observe them, but we really don't know where they derive or what they are exactly. So trends are used as a form of measure when observing variables over a specific duration. They can be purely conceptual, like in mathematics, or represent scientific analysis, or for the purpose of this presentation, be used to describe changes in a civilization over time, which would be present day us. Trends are detectable expressions of collective human behavior and are derivatives of culture, economy, and innovation. These three are the pillars that drive trends in regards to civilization. Now, there's many other variables to include, but they all neatly fit under these three verticals. So when I'm doing a trend analysis, I kind of look at trends from all aspects of civilization, modern day economies and markets. So trends derive from all sorts of aspects of modern life. If we start with industry, there's industry trends in manufacturing and product development and just general technologies. And then we have cultural trends, which encompass design, fashion, art, research, societal trends, which is the adoption of new morals that changes every several decades. We can just look back through history and see moral trends. Governance changes, those trend from whatever administration's sitting in the White House, depending on their belief systems. Market trends, speculation, supply and demand, business practices, all of these things and many more encompass what trends really are. The difficulty is analyzing all of those data points to really find trajectories in the direction of the trends. So I have a short little clip I made. This was from the March of the Machines, the AI Revolution. It encompasses several little mini clips put together to kind of give perspective of what we're going to talk about.
there's a group of technologies that are combining to create transformation across almost every industry at the moment. And those technologies include things like artificial intelligence, 3D printing, robotics, big data, and then some things on the sort of life sciences front in terms of genetics and medical imaging. And that these things are sort of combining in a way that's bringing about a host of transformative changes across industries.
This particular revolution is that it gets into a whole range of things that people only thought were ever only possible for humans to do. Jobs that were human jobs before aren't going to be human jobs anymore.
At the heart of this fourth revolution is artificial intelligence, the ability of machines to match and perhaps one day surpass the cognitive ability of their human creators.
What's happening now is a big deal. It is making a big difference in the way people live, the way people interact with each other. It is sort of obliterating distance. It is, in some cases, removing humans from tasks that we once thought were the sole province of the human mind. These analytic tasks that we thought only a human brain could do, we're suddenly finding that algorithms can do, that machines can do.
These are early days in the brave new world of artificial intelligence.
Very early days. And
We may already be starting to
infancy.
see the effect on the wider economy. In the first decade of this century, the net total number of jobs created in the United
Get ready
States
for this.
was zero.
Zero net jobs. That may come as a shock
What we
to
see
many.
is that in the United States, we've been having what we call jobless recovery. So clearly there's something happening there. And I think part of what's happening is that jobs disappear when a recession happens. And then when finally recovery comes back, companies find that they're able to leverage technology to avoid rehiring a lot of those workers. And so it's taken longer and longer for the jobs to reappear, basically because of machine learning, because we now have this technology that allows smart software algorithms to look at data and based on that to learn how to do things, to figure things out, to make predictions. So it really is no longer the case that some human being is sitting down and telling a computer exactly what to do step by step. Computers are now having the ability to figure that out for themselves. You can imagine a future where every device, every appliance, all kinds of industrial equipment, everything communicates and talks to each other. And I think that one of the things will happen is that artificial intelligence will kind of use that as a platform. It will scale across all of that. Everything will become more intelligent.
So I wrote an article in 2020, April, I believe. So at the beginning of the pandemic, and I wrote an article on how COVID was an accidental catalyst for automation. And we're seeing that now, much like he said, businesses are finding that with the loss of employees, they were able to subsidize their pipelines with automated services. And we'll talk more about this in a second. So AI and automation, AI and industry. So these are a few of the higher trajectory industries that are implementing automation. So these are the fastest growers presently. Not the only ones, but the fastest. We have entertainment, real estate, e-commerce, travel, banking, manufacturing, food tech, healthcare. And again, these are just a few. These are the fastest growers, but not at all representing the entire spectrum of industries that are rapidly adopting automation. So the inevitable future of AI, this can raise some eyebrows here, but I assure you, given any rate of increase over time, this is our eventuality. Presently, we are in ANI, which is machine learning, artificial narrow intelligence. And so we're kind of at the limited memory, can handle complex tasks and so forth. These are the things that drive Siri and autopilot for vehicles and planes. But given any rate of increase over time, we will inevitably see situations where AI will develop a theory of mind. And this will occur due to the coalescing factor of algorithms. If you have a million algorithms and you kind of start joining them together, and you will find that these algorithms will inherently develop some sort of machine intelligence. The only argument is how long that'll take. Some say 10 years, some say 50, but very few industry researchers or people like myself, futurists, will say that that's not going to happen. Self-aware AI, is a subject of theory. It's so far away, it's hard to speculate on. But again, given any rate of increase over time, if we watch the trajectory of computational power and data storage and data collection, it's not impossible to believe that AI could eventually obtain some sort of super intelligence. It sounds sci-fi, but so did electric cars, 200 years ago. Global automation. So the age of automation, let's do a first principles approach. Our mechanism for really breaking down objects of study. If we look at it in this sense, all jobs can be reduced down to individual steps equating to yes or no. It may seem complicated now, if we consider a chef, how could you possibly equate that down to yes or no? But in fact, you can. It may be millions of choices, but those millions of choices can absolutely be broken down to yes or no. And that's, as you guys know, is just simple binary. A computer could very easily plow through millions or even billions of decisions. So this means in theory that nearly all jobs can potentially be automated. Many jobs won't be automated simply due to the lack of will or revenue gain. If it's not that beneficial to automate, you probably won't see it automated. However, trends suggest that the free market is intrinsically primed for automation, and we'll cover that in just a second. In doing so, entire economies will become significantly automated through AI and robotics. This, again, it's an inevitability. We can argue over how long this will take, but given any rate of increase or pending any sort of catastrophe, this is our future. So we really have to start thinking about it more in terms of it being our future. The economic success of capitalism is based on healthy market competition. It benefits consumers and enterprises alike, creating higher revenue streams for companies at reduced costs for customers. So this is the benefit of automation. This is the front end benefit. We all kind of benefit initially. Makes things cheaper for companies, makes things cheaper for us. It's good all around. However, company A is utilizing an automated process that increases its overall efficiency and reduces labor costs. It stands to reason with any sort of logic that company B will need to follow suit if it wishes to remain competitive. This has been seen throughout the history of capitalism and just free market kind of historical trends. This feedback loop can be defined as hyper-automation. As more companies automate, their market counterparts, so their competition, will expand and innovate upon that framework in order to drive competition. What this does is creates a feedback loop, which we define as hyper-automation. So this was a long Wall Street Journal documentary that I kind of broke up into little clips that pertain to what we're discussing here. It's not as long as the previous video.
Some economists say the world is entering a second machine age. Artificial intelligence and other advancements enabling robots to do tasks that until now only human eyes, minds, and hands could handle. The show is in Asia. Here, robots are being bought and sold in numbers unrivaled anywhere else in the world. These are the types of robots Professor Erik Brynjolfsson is keeping an eye on as MIT's chief scholar on the digital economy.
We used to have to really painstakingly teach the machines step by step, program them what to do. And now machine learning is enabling the machines to figure out on their own how to solve problems. You put together the algorithms, the data.
And this is one of the major differences from previous industrial ages.
In the performance of
a million-fold improvement.
Yeah.
And what does that allow you to do?
So one really important thing to do on the factory floor is just be able to recognize objects. And that's something that only humans could do well until recently.
We traveled to an area that's considered the electronics capital of the world, the Pearl River Delta region. Headquartered there is Rappu, China's largest keyboard and mice manufacturer. We asked the CEO why his company is making the move to robotics.
Because in China have a rapid salary increase beginning from
Big
2008.
salary is a
So we
relative
feel
term, obviously.
the little pressure from the labor side. So we decided to change a lot our manufacturing system to robot.
Wages for the average urban employee in China have more than doubled since 2008. Rapu, he says, in the past few years, used robotics to reduce its
Can you
factory
imagine
workforce
US income doubling over 10
2,500
years?
people to now 1,000, and more automation is on the way.
So you're bringing more robots in.
Yeah, and then make even the logistics we use a robot.
Even the logistics.
You seem very happy about this.
Yeah, because it will make my company more competitive in the field.
And there you have it. It'll make his company more competitive in the field. And this isn't an outlier. This is all companies vying to remain competitive. So forecasting labor trends. We're going to be referencing a study. There's a few studies out there forecasting labor trends for the next 10, 20, 30 years. I found, based on my research, the McKinsey Global Institute's Future of Work in America happened to be the best, most researched paper on this specific topic. And why it is significant is that they reference two previous studies that offered a platform to finish with updated data points and analysis. So that's what we'll be referencing for the remainder. So they offer a midpoint adoption scenario. So what that means is instead of the most conservative estimates of automation adoption, which no one believes to be zero. I've never met anybody in my profession who believes automation to start declining and hit zero. And then the higher estimates, which I actually am more aligned with, is around 30% automation of the workforce. So they kind of just straddle the middle comfortably and use that midpoint as their research. And from there, from the 15%, we get some interesting data points. So 50% of the work activities are technically automatable by adapting currently demonstrated technologies. And keep in mind, that's currently demonstrated technology. That's not technology in 5 years or 10 years, that's just current. And we're all aware of how quickly technology is developing. 6 of 10 current occupations have more than 30% of activities that are technically automatable. So that's your 6 people out of 10, a third of their job can be automated. Work potentially displaced by adoption of automation by 2030. Estimates globally using the midpoint scenario would be 400 million displaced workers. Those are jobs that won't be coming back. Those are employees who will struggle to find new work, especially given the drop in the need for manual labor. And then some analysts, including myself, think it's closer to 30 when you include convergent technologies and some of the technologies that weren't considered during the study, like quantum computing and so forth. That puts it around 800 million workforce that would need to change occupation would be 3% or 75 million. In comparison to 400 million, that seems small, but 75 million is a huge amount of people. So workforce displacement using this midpoint scenario, almost 15 million of young workers will have workforce displacement. Those are the jobs that you and I, when we first got out of college, we got those jobs to help pay the bills and kind of act as a framework for our careers. Those jobs will no longer be available. So what are the youth going to do to pursue a career now? How are they going to pay their climbing student loan bills and health insurance and whatnot? Age over 50, almost 12 million workers over the age of 50 will have to be forced to find new work. And since retirement age increases almost annually, I'm not quite sure what these people are going to do. It's harder to train for new professions at that age. And then you have the displacement of the minority sectors who tend to be adversely affected more so than the rest of us in regards to these types of dramatic changes. And four times higher displacement risk for workers with high school diploma or less. And again, that goes back to minority groups and underserved rural areas. They're going to be hit the hardest. Here's a kind of a heat map, and I've circled on this map where net job growth is less than 10% expectation to 2030. So you can see large swaths of the country will be experiencing very low job growth, all the while the jobs that are available will quickly become automated, therefore reducing any chance for millions and millions of Americans to find work. And then you see hyper concentrations of job growth. So small little pockets will be counting for most of the job growth in America. And here's a breakdown from that study. So out of 165 million jobs, we're looking at 45 million potentially displaced workers due to automation. 4 million right off the bat initially as the first displaced people. And this is already occurring. So that's a large chunk. And keep in mind, this is a midpoint scenario. So this is only representing 15% of automation growth or automation taking over jobs. So if we were to think 30% toward the higher end, half of this pie would represent individuals who need to either find new jobs or are simply displaced altogether. Almost 40% of Americans are in occupational categories that could shrink by 2030. I think that's overly conservative. I would say 50 to 60% of occupations could shrink by 2030, if not more. Just office support jobs alone equates to 8 million phased out jobs. And that's excluding legal work where algorithms like GPT-3 have been shown to automate legalese and that sort of thing. So I suspect that would be higher as well. A quarter of Hispanic workers are projected to be displaced. Again, we talk about youth workers in highly automatable jobs. So these figures are quite staggering. So the need for structured policy regarding hyperautomation, this is what I do these presentations for. This is why I speak with legislators. It's a very important topic, and the number of U.S. legislative policies addressing workforce automation, I'm going to go ahead and let you take a guess out of the hundreds of thousands of policies that exist in the U.S. government. What percentage do you think are addressing workforce automation? And you might be surprised by the answer, which is 0. None, absolutely nothing. There are no policies currently in the pipeline to be presented. There are no policies in effect whatsoever addressing workforce automation. And given the amount and figures that we just covered, you'd think this would set some sort of precedent to have forward thinking on the topic, but it doesn't. And that's why I'd kind of do these discussions to bring this to the light. So there are some proposed mechanisms for safeguarding against wealth consolidation and labor reduction due to hyperautomation. And these are the types of mechanisms that I discuss with legislators, none of which are silver bullets, which you'll see. So robot taxation, a means for taxing free market entities that utilize physically automated processes to offset manual labor costs. Right off the bat, you can see how difficult of a process that would be. How would you measure a company's automation, and then how would you tax them based on that? Would you tax them on the offset of human labor that the automation provides? If so, what means of metrics would you use? So that's a very difficult mechanism to implement. Universal basic income. I'm sure you can remember Andrew Yang's presidential candidacy platform, UBI. It became kind of a catchphrase. I actually spoke with some of his advisors during that run. about automation and kind of discuss universal basic income. But what it is, it's a tool to help displace the economic impacts of hyper-automation subsidized through multinational tax reform. So presently, multinationals, I've worked for them, some of you work for them. I don't think they're inherently evil. They're really working within the system that is provided, and that system is broken. When you're a multinational and you're generating billions in revenue and utilizing infrastructure in America and paying nothing in taxes, that's a problem. That's a problem with policy, not a problem with the companies. So we really need to create a blanket reform for how we tax that and use that tax to kind of offset some of these problems that are coming down the road. So, you know, UBI is certainly doable, not perfect. Federally funded tech trade schools. This is a newer mechanism that I reference once in a while. It's a method to protect middle class and underserved citizens from labor force obsolescence. So what that means, basically, you know, you have your minority groups, your rural groups, your undereducated groups who can't afford to go to college. I mean, we all know why. It's ridiculously expensive, and then you're indebted for the remainder of your life with student debt. This would offer them a means to go to school, learn trades that are applicable, whether or not they are piggybacking off automation or somehow supplement automation or anything of that nature. And I imagine they would have, I imagine they'd have rules that you'd have to graduate in order to have it paid, or if you dropped out early, you may have to pay a portion. So, you know, that's a doable mechanism, not perfect. Certainly doesn't address the whole problem. Another one is just a simple moratorium on automation altogether. This is the most unlikely scenario in which policy would prohibit an organization from a certain percentage of automation safeguards citizens' right to work. I think we all can agree that this will never happen. I simply included it because it's one of the few mechanisms that have been proposed. Another mechanism would be a dramatic minimum wage increase. I have a feeling that this would cause some ruckus on the Senate floor, but this is a method to reduce the need for multiple family members to generate income. We've seen this in the past. For many decades of the 19th century, most families could operate comfortably with a single working family member. So in theory, an average blue-collar worker could provide a family of 4 and remain comfortably above the poverty line. That doesn't really exist now. Yes, there are some quote-unquote blue-collar workers who do quite well, but they generally have specialties, and so I wouldn't consider them blue-collar. They would probably be more specialists. So in summary, based on trend analysis, further automation is inevitable due to inherent free market competitiveness. Automation will dramatically affect the labor force. These are all givens. These are not opinions. There is no one to blame. Automation is a natural progression of technology and will provide significant benefits to all. And it will, on the front end, it absolutely does. So that's something to embrace. But the age of automation differs from previous industrial ages in that machines have never been able to analyze, self-repair, communicate, and improve upon themselves. I often get an argument that, you know, there's nothing to worry about. Look at the previous industrial ages. They generated jobs. Well, I don't think it's equatable, and here's why. Previous industrial ages did generate jobs. They generated new jobs. The old jobs were replaced by line working assemblies of machines to kind of automate simple tasks, but they created new jobs. The problem with the age of automation is that these new jobs will be automated. So any new jobs that derive from the age of automation will inherently be automatable. And as we've discussed, those jobs will be automated. So pairing that with the dramatic need for labor, it's a problem. It's a significant problem. Tens of millions of US workers will become displaced and/or unemployed by 2030. Again, this is fact. These changes are happening at an exponential rate. And at an exponential rate, it's funny because a lot of people don't understand that exponentials, they can be, steep exponentials, beginning of exponentials. Right now, we're in the, very beginning phases of this curve. So we expect this to just increase even faster. There are no policies present to mitigate hyperautomation or to protect people's right to work. There are some potential solutions, but each has very limiting factors of success. So I imagine it'll need to be an amalgamation of several of those and some that we haven't even thought of yet. So we really need to start publicly discussing this problem in a public forum. Once in a while, we'll get a news snippet on automation, but then it's just forgotten in mainstream fashion. But in not doing so and not discussing this topic in educational and institutional means, we risk economic disaster, truly, on an unimaginable scale. And it's only unimaginable because our economies are so much larger than we previously have experienced. So when these unimaginable economies of scale are disrupted, those disruptions are massive and uncomparable to previous iterations. So I'd like to take questions now if anyone has any.
Thank you, Michai, for the wonderful presentation. We have one question. What about the worker who lost their jobs due to the automation? Is there any alternative?
So to clarify, what about the workers who've been displaced due to automation?
Yes.
Well, that's a good question. Through no fault of their own and through free market machinery, people will be displaced. And so what are their options? Well, they could move to the only few locations in the country that will have job growth. So we saw those on the heat map of the United States where I had circled some of the areas with lower job growth. So we'll see transitions to these mega cities. And I don't think that's necessarily a good thing. When you pile people into these mega cities to pursue low-end jobs, it really doesn't solve the problem at all. I think the only way we can solve the problem is before it happens, before the people are displaced. If you do find yourself displaced, perhaps trying to become a consultant, pick a field that you're passionate about and really deep dive into it, become an expert. Anybody can do it. Everybody has a passion. Everybody has something that they're knowledgeable about. Find that thing and really research it. I know that's not the best advice, but that's really all you could do.
Thank you, Michai. And another question is about the security in this hyper automated technological world today, where there are a lot of artificial intelligence and machine learning algorithms are there for the, let's say, self-driving cars. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, the attackers are also getting educated, and they create some adversary inputs which can make these machine learning algorithms generate the wrong outputs. Yes. So how do we balance between this automation and security?
Well, that coincides with the ancient cat and mouse game. And I'm not as concerned about the security as some people, and here's why. So that's a great example. Digitized systems and automated systems can be hacked in theory to alter the data and cause chaos. But at the same time, somebody could walk up to your car and stab the tire with a knife or cut your brake line, and the same sort of effect would happen. I don't think that's a huge potential risk. It is a risk, I won't deny that. But in terms of disaster, I think security on terms of energy sectors, that's a big one. As we become more automated, we're more dependent on the infrastructure of energy. So any security risks that could happen would probably fall into communications, energy, that sort of thing.
Right. Okay, thank you very much. I don't see any further question at this point.
Well, thank you, everybody. I appreciate it, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mishai, and thank you everyone for joining this session. Have a nice day.
Thank you.